Please arouse bodhicitta and listen to the teaching. His Holiness is continuing the transmission of the instruction on developing the two types of bodhicitta according to the tradition of the two founders of the great traditions. The section we are in now is the beginning of the actual practice. And this first begins the description of developing aspirational bodhicitta, and then taking the vows with taking the bodhisattva vows with engaged bodhicitta. And then it says in order to make your being workable, you practice meditation. You sit on a comfortable place in a comfortable cushion in an isolated place, and supplicate the Buddha to make you able to meditate. You supplicate the Guru, and then rest with your hands in the posture of equanimity. Straighten your spine, tuck your chin, straighten your shoulders, join your tongue to the palate, and so forth. Then you rest without thinking of anything. Then you meditate upon your breath, counting your breath first from 1 to 10, and as you get good at that, you extend it up to 100. You rest like a spinner who has the right tension on spinning the thread, or an elephant trainer who knows how to care for the elephant. Your mind no longer thinks of this life, you become peaceful and tame, and you naturally engage in virtue without effort. Next is a section on eliminating conceptual fabrications. And again, this is a type of Guru Yoga. A supplication to the Guru. The supplication is asking the Gurus to free you from the chains of grasping at the dualistic attributes. You look at your mind with the mind directly. You rest simply there. If something moves, do not let it move. The person moving has never experienced moving. Within that, you rest very loosely. Next is the contemplation that all phenomena are like dreams. Imagine the Gurus as before and past them. Visualize the Gurus as before and supplicate them in. Everything that appears is empty. Everything that empty appears, and all phenomena that are like that are like dreams. So thinking about this, rest in that. When you arise from, so everything arises like a dream. Everything, in this way, appearance and emptiness are not contradictory. Next is a section on analyzing the nature of unborn awareness. Examining when the mind, something occurs in the mind, where does it come from? Where does it stay? Where does it go? In the end, how does it stop? When it stops, how does it stop? What is its color? What is its shape? And so forth. When you examine, you see that it is free of any arising, staying, or going. Next is the section on the self-liberating in the antidote. Meditate on the yoga, supplicate, rest in equipoise, and look at your mind with your look at your mind with your mind. Look at the person who is resting. Look at what is resting itself. Next is a section on meditating through practicing through meditation. Begins with supplication to the gurus. When your mind is moistened with devotion, rest when one-pointed meditation. And there are further instructions here on exactly how to do the practice. Next is a section on eliminating the mental factors as they are thoughts. Whatever we see, whatever we think of, we should just rest. We just rest without changing anything. There is no other method. So just as clouds and mist come from the sky and then dissolve into the sky, all the appearance of thought and subject and object also come from the Dharma expanse and dissolve into the Dharma expanse. Next is meditation on the essence of the path. Next is the meditation on resting in the essence of the path, the ground. Again, this is a description of a resting meditation. Fourth is in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. So whatever we are doing, reciting prayers, drinking or eating, or so forth, we make sure that we never lose the feeling of meditation. Everything that appears does appear, however, but though it appears, do not grasp that it is true. Whatever appears as external objects of form, sound, smell, taste, and so forth are just, we recognize them as being like the dream appearances in a dream. The appearances never stop, and so for that reason you must give up all misdeeds and downfalls. You must keep the three types of precepts purely. Always engage in the 10 Dharma practices, such as offering to the 3 jewels. Next is a meditation on relative bodhicitta. First, you meditate on compassion. First, you meditate on those who are easy to meditate for. First, contemplate the unrepayable kindness of your mother from this life who has given you this faultless body with its leisures and research and its resources and leisures. She took care of you while you were in her womb. And when she knew that she was pregnant, she made aspirations. May my child be beautiful. May have all the faculties. May it be lovely to look at and have no problems. Made many aspirations. When you were born, she felt great suffering, as if she had been split by an axe or a knife. But not thinking anything of her own suffering, she only would think of her child. And after you were born, she cared for you in all ways with great effort. She licked off she wiped off your mucus and so forth, cleaned your filth with her hand, gave you food from her own mouth, and nursed you at her own breast. Because of this, you were able to grow up, you were able to meet the spiritual friends and enter the teachings of the Buddha, to take the vows and practice the Dharma. All of this only if this is not the kindness of your mother's, whose kindness is it? Without thinking of and now this mother, when she dies, she is about to fall into the 3 lower realms. If she goes there, she'll experience such different sufferings. Think of her with great compassion. How can you help your mother? So you should speak to her kindly with a respectful mind. And serve her. You serve her with good food, and give her good clothes, comfortable clothes to wear, and so forth. So meditate upon her, recognizing that, and also think of all sentient beings, that have they been your mother in other lifetimes, think that they have cared for you in other lifetimes, but they are about to fall in lifetimes. They're about to fall into the lower realms. think about them as if you were with the same compassion as an armless mother who sees her child carried away by a flood. Contemplate this until your body is shaking and quivering. Like, how could you bear the suffering of your kind old former mothers in the lower realms? Think that you could bear to live, to remain in samsara as long as there is space in order to protect your mothers. Think of no one who has been kind for you. That there is no sentient being who has not been your old mother. They have no other hope but then the gurus and the jewels. Think you have the wisdom and compassion. You have the ability to protect them. And then devote yourself entirely to the gurus, thinking that they know what to do to benefit your mothers. Think how your kind mothers, all sentient beings, now experienced unbearable suffering in samsara and the lower realms. Consider the different types of suffering of the different realms, in the three lower realms and in the upper realms, the pervasive suffering in the upper realms. Think about the how difficult it would be to repay the kindness of all the mothers. Supplicate to the sources of refuge. Think of the billions and billions of universes there are. And think that all the sentient beings fill these, all these realms, from the incessant hell to the peak of existence. And all of them have been your mother and have been kind to you for many times, for an incalculable number of times. Contemplate the suffering that they experience. So meditate upon unbearable compassion for them just as for the mother as you do for your mother of this life. That's the second 40-second instruction. Next is meditating upon compassion for those for whom it is difficult to develop compassion. There are many people who criticize you, who have aversion or jealousy towards you. Those who have been competing with you from the time you were children. And then there are those who have done nothing wrong to you in this lifetime, but because of some karma from the past, you immediately feel, the moment you see them, you feel that they're unattractive, or you feel aversion to them. And so you must especially develop compassion for such beings as these. For this and these sort of beings who are now, whom we do not get along with now, have in the past been your parents many, many times. But because they've done this many times, but because of moving to the next life, we do not recognize them. Now, if I were to return their harm with help, then this would cancel out the karmic debt. Again, this continues with a Guru Yoga practice of visualizing the deities and supplicating them. think that if there's such beings as these, if someone I were to have hold malice towards them, then there'd be no one lower in this world lower than you. Bless me to develop great compassion for these people these kind mothers of mine who appear to be harmful to me. So develop compassion. Next is a meditation on increasing and enhancing compassion through physical postures. So think that you are surrounded by all sentient beings, and that the gurus and the lineage are all this sources of refuge are in the sky above you. Imagine that you're offering everything to them. Develop great compassion for all sentient beings. And there's a supplication to the gurus. And supplicate while visualizing them, declaring the truth of the needing to have compassion. So that was the 41st meditation. That's going to be the 44th. Next is another enhancing compassion. Think that you and all sentient beings are either squatting or kneeling, holding your hands in prayer at your chest, and with great fervent devotion in your mind, recite a supplication in a wail. Also as a refuge for the perfection of wisdom, love, and power. We all sentient beings do the power of karma wander in samsara. We experience we are oppressed by many unbearable sufferings. Please grasp us with compassion, and so forth. These are the main practices on compassion. So we should practice properly. And it is important for us to practice as much as we can. Now the other day, as I said I would give the transmission from the beginning of the Jewel Ornament Liberation and to the up to the section on the Spiritual Master. Now, among the many different editions of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, the one that has the most reliable origins and the purest history, so that I will recite you the transmission based on this from the based on this edition. So I will now give the transition from the beginning to the section on the condition, the spiritual friend. Summary of the dual ornament deliberation in the beginning reads: the cause, support, and the conditions, the methods, the result, and the activity. These are the 6 general summaries of unexcelled Bodhi, as the wise should know. The cause is the Buddha nature. The support is the precious human body. The support is the spiritual master. The means is their instructions. The result is the bodies of the perfect Buddha. The activity is is benefiting beings without thought. And this teaches the body of the treatise. Then following that, there is an explanation of each of these. So it begins with the description of the cause as the Buddha nature. Begins with talking about how sentient beings are need to achieve unexcelled enlightenment. You might wonder whether such inferior individuals as us would be able to achieve enlightenment even if we tried. And the answer is, if we tried, yes, why wouldn't we achieve enlightenment? Because we and all sentient beings have the cause of Buddhahood. Because we all have the Buddha nature. This section then talks about the different types of capacity, the different types of family that each different type of being can have. There are the capacities, those whose capacity is severed. The uncertain family is the family of the listeners, the family of the self-Buddhas, the family of the Pratyeka Buddhas. There is the family of the Mahayana. This section is examining whether the enlightenment or the nirvana of the hearers and Pratyeka Buddhas is actual or not. And if it is not, then what is it worth practicing? And the answer is that the Buddha said that he taught these 2 paths because even though it is not true enlightenment, it is as if it is like merchants who are going to a jewel island. When they come to one piece of land, they stop and they rest there for a while. And then the captain says, "We have not got there all the way. Let us go now the rest of the way." Similarly, the hearers and the self-Buddhas come to the temporary nirvana, and then the Buddha instructs them, "You have not gone all the way. You must continue the rest of the way." And then after they have rested, they're able to engage in the path to complete Buddhahood. In this way, the hearers and the self-Buddhas will then develop the attitude of bodhicitta and strive at the path and achieve perfect Buddhahood. Now there is the Mahayana family. Now there are two different types of family. There is the naturally present family, and there is and then there is the perfectly accomplished family, or the developing family. The naturally present family is the potential that is present within beings from the very beginning to develop the qualities of a Buddha. It is achieved just by the nature of things. The developing family is the family that is generated by cultivating in order to achieve the ability to develop the qualities of the Buddha. Now, of these 5 families, the proximate cause of Buddhahood is the Mahayana family. Since the listeners and self-Buddhas those in the families of the listeners and self-Buddha will eventually achieve Buddhahood. They have the distant cause of Buddhahood. The Buddhahood is present. Buddha nature is present in all sentient beings, just like silver is present in silver ore, sesame oil and sesame seeds, butter and milk, and so forth. Just as you can get silver from ore, sesame oil from sesame seeds, and butter from milk, all sentient beings are able to achieve Buddhahood. Next is in the next section of the text, the second chapter, is the discussion of the precious human body. Begins the description of the 8 pleasures and the 10 resources. In this portion of the text, it is saying that the suffering of gods and humans, slight suffering of gods and humans, does have a quality, and that is that we can develop weariness for samsara. Our pride will be pacified, we can develop compassion for sentient beings, and we can refrain from wrong actions and develop joy for virtue. There are other qualities for suffering as well. Weariness dispels our haughtiness. We develop compassion for those in samsara, and we refrain from misdeeds. It is said. Next, it is a description of the the 10 resources. Up to the first 5 are the resources from oneself, and the next 5 are the resources that come from others. Why is the precious human body called precious? Because it is similar to a wish-fulfilling jewel. Because it's difficult to find, it is precious. Because it's a great benefit, it is precious. It is extremely difficult to find, as said in many sutras. This portion now quotes several sutras that describe how difficult it is to find a human body, as well as citing the way of the Bodhisattva. It also describes this in terms of the analogies for being difficult to find, such as the example of the yolk floating in an ocean, and there is a blind turtle that surfaces only once every 100 years. Think of the chance that that turtle would pop his head up through the surface of the ocean and put its neck through the yolk. And that is similar to the chances of achieving a human life. If you wonder why is the human body difficult to achieve, it is because it comes from the practice of virtue. But there's so many. Different. We act so much on misdeeds and non-virtues that it is very difficult for us to do any virtue, and therefore very difficult to achieve human body. Next, there's a description of the 3 types of individuals, the lesser, middling, and greater, as described in the Lamp for Path of Enlightenment. Next is a discussion of how beneficial the human body is. And it features a quote by the Acharya Chandragomi. Next, the text of how this body that is so difficult to find and such great benefit is easy to perishes easily. So that is probably better to speak about faith and the spiritual master from tomorrow, the next continuing sections of the text. Tomorrow, what day is tomorrow? Tomorrow is the 8th. On either tomorrow or the next day. As the other day I spoke about the 4 sessions of Guru Yoga and talked about how important it was, and I gave a brief introduction to that. And so as I described that, and when I described that, what the Khenpo said is that I should recite the transmission. It would be very good to give the transition, and also to give some instructions on this. And so for that reason, now the other day, it's like that maybe it wasn't so good that I spoke about the 4 sessions being good. It'd probably giving the transmission would be fine, but giving instructions is difficult. If there is a Lama who has experience who gives transition, then even if he doesn't say anything else, just through the fluctuations in the voice and the way that he speaks, there's a great difference. There's a great difference in the benefit from it. If there's someone who hasn't had much practice, who may say a lot of things orally, but will that be able to really create an impression on your being? For example, if you talk to someone who's been to India about India, and if you talk to someone who hasn't been about India, there's a different type of feeling. There's a greater and lesser feelings that come from it. And so this is the words that someone who speaks about, the words that they may speak, someone who knows about meditation and someone who doesn't, may be the same, but the feeling is very different. But sometimes it's like there's no choice but to give instructions. And so then you give instructions, generally, they're the expansions written, they're the instructions by Karma Chakme and the ones by the Keme Kamarinchen Dodge. But last year I managed to get an old instruction by the 9th Karmapa Wangchen. I'd heard that there was this. It is explained that there is this text in the Karma Chakmas, but text. However, we were not able to get that text until recently. But we had the great fortune of actually being able to receive that text. So we can use these. And if I give you a brief instruction on these, then I think that there's nothing... I won't be able to give any great explanation of this or any profound instruction on this, but it's something that can actually just introduce this to you, so that you can sort of think, oh, that's how it is. So that you can have just like a brief opening into the text. And it would be good for you all to know this. And so either tomorrow or the next day, whenever it fits in, then I will do that. So I'd like to just let you all know about that. Similarly, last year, the other day when we got together with the Khenpos and we're speaking about things, what the Khenpo said to me was, the Kempo said that we should give some brief explanations about the tantras to the Kempos and to those who have finished the Shedder. It is difficult for us to achieve that. The opportunity to do this, and so we should invite a master who has some experience in the tantra, knowledge of the tantras, and this person would be able to give teachings on the tantras to the Kempos and those who have finished the those who have finished the Shedda. So please invite such a person. And this is something I've kept in mind. Now, while I was at Jute, there is a geshe who often has many conference or discussions about tantra. And I thought first I might be able to invite him, but he is always teaching the students at Gyutam Monastery, and so since that is his primary responsibility, it's often difficult for him to come for a long time. And if we had to invite someone within the Kajus, then it would be difficult to find someone. Everyone has great activities and many things to do, and so there's not very easily to invite them. And it's fine to hire someone who would be able to come and actually stay for that long. So I've been thinking about what would be best to do. And so I thought that there's no choice but for me to to do this. I really don't know anything about the tantras. But it's like a blind person trying to light a lamp in the darkness. It's like the blind, they can't see anything. It's in addition to that, it's dark, and they're trying to light a lamp. They can't see anything. Mm-hmm. But if as it said, if it's going to help, you should at least use a dog. And so if there's no benefit, if there's no other thing to do, then we must have to. So the time for me to use. We've come to that point where we have to use that, and so as the Kempos now, I keep on. The Kempos do not dare to say to me, you must do the tantras. So, excuse me, I do not dare to say that I could teach the tantras to the Kempos, but the infinite ancient and new traditions of the tantras. And the Dharma of these traditions is the primary practice in Tibetan Buddhism. And it is important for us to uphold the tradition of the transmission of the scriptures, as well as the study and the transmission of the scriptures, particularly in the Marpa Kaju tradition. Marpa the translator went to the noble land of India 3 times with undergoing great hardship and difficulty. Now, most of the instructions he brought back, we have not been able to uphold those traditions and uphold the transmission. Most of them have been lost. Likewise, because of the kindness of Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Tai, there are some mandalas of the Marpa Tantras in the Kajunatsu. And so it is the fact, and these come from the tradition of Ngok, the translator, and so this is the kindness of Jamgakotra Lodotaya. And so the Guhya Samaja that is passed down from the, has been passed down, the Guhya Samaja from the Marpa tradition has been passed down primarily. But the teachings on the Guhya Samaja teaching come down through the Gelugpa tradition, but the origin of these comes back to the to Tsongkhapa. Now there are many unparalleled explanations of many unparalleled descriptions of the Dharma, and it is a responsibility to preserve these. And so now it's just like just merely in order to, as a symbolic method, or in order to generate enthusiasm with you as well. I thought I could maybe give a bit of a tantra, a bit of an introduction to the tantra, a bit of an introduction to the tantra. I thought I would make some efforts to do this. Now, if an individual who's as deluded as I were to do this, for one aspect, I'm young still. Another aspect, I have very little experience in teaching. So if we can gather some people and put some effort into it, then maybe the Khenpos and the spiritual masters will maybe able to know more than I. And so then they would be able to, we can develop some more enthusiasm and we can uphold the teachings. And preserve the traditions of X-tradition, preserve the transmissions of the Tantra. So I think it'll help us develop some confidence that we can do this. And so for that reason, so perhaps tomorrow at 2 p.m. without many people, the Khenpos, the Acharyas, and not many people at all, we can begin this as just a symbolic opening. And by having a symbolic opening this year, because of that, the tantras that have been passed down from the Buddha Vajradhara, of both the old and the new tradition, can be preserved and propagated. And in particular, the ocean of tantras that were translated by the passed down from Marpa the translator can be propagated and preserved. And my hope is that this will turn out well. Now I'm committing to many things. So that is all for now. I haven't much else to say.